My name is Robbie Turman, and today is October 16th, 2025, and I am interviewing Betsy Heuer in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. This interview is being recorded as part of the Women in Leadership Oral History Project. Betsy, do you give permission to the Leonard and Simons Jewish Community Archives to publish, duplicate, or otherwise use this recording for educational purposes and for use as deemed appropriate by the archives?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start right at the beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born at Harper Hospital in Detroit, Michigan. February 14th, 1955, Valentine's Day.
And tell me a little bit about your family, your parents, grandparents.
So my parents were Selma Snider and Harvey Snider. They got married when they were young. When they got married, my grandfather, Louis Berry, was the chair of Federation's campaign. And they had a very large wedding because he said anybody that would donate $100 or more would be invited to their wedding. So they had a very large wedding at the Book Cadillac.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about your grandfather, because he had a big place in the Detroit Jewish community and in philanthropy.
Yes, he did. And people do tend to forget about him now because their memories just don't go back that far. He started becoming very active in Israel at a very young age. First of all, he came over from Liverpool, that's where he was born, with nothing. And then one by one, he sent over for all of his family. And little by little, he would walk by a building and say, I'm going to own that building someday. And then sure enough, eventually, he would own that building someday. He ended up coming to Detroit because there was a cousin here who was like doing dry goods peddling, I think it was. At any rate, he had big plans. And right before World War II was about to start, real estate was kind of and my grandma, Rebecca Berry, said that he should just go away for a weekend and things would be changing. And they did. And then he was able to start purchasing real estate.
And got very involved in the Jewish community.
Very involved. He worked with boats. He had gone first. He went with JDC to the camps, to the DP camps. He talked, was it Holtzman? I think into going with him. Joe Holtzman didn't want to go. And this is what I heard. Louis said to him, just come with me. And if you're not inspired and moved by it after, I'll never ask you again to do another thing. But in the meantime, they went. That got Joe Holtzman involved, and they started there. He also worked on boats. I think that was maybe $75,000 to get people over then. And that was a little bit at odds with Federation, but he also helped get people over when they needed boats. He started with Federation also in New York. They needed some office space. He was able to provide that for him, and then sort of helped Federation get really set up here and in a bigger way to help Detroit become the powerhouse, punching above its weight that it's always been.
So he was influential on you.
Oh, my God. And I went to shul with him every week. When I was little, he and Dave Myro would pick me up. I'd sit in the middle of the two of them in the front seat, and we would go to shul.
What shul?
Shaare Zedek.
And do you have any siblings?
I do. I have one sister.
Older, younger?
Younger.
Okay.
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about your childhood as far as, were you involved in any Jewish organizations?
Well, I had a very special and wonderful set of circumstances where I lived in Detroit on Woodstock, which is near 8 Mile and Woodward. We lived on the same street as Rabbi Adler's daughter, Nomi Benstein. And we, therefore, every week when I went to shul with my grandfather, and by the way, my other grandfather went to shul every week too. His name was Norman Snider. Anyway, he just didn't hold all of the same roles. That Louis was president of the shul, I think, twice. He was the head of the building committee. But Helest, I digress. I got to get back to Rabbi Adler. So anyway, after shul, I would go with Rabbi Adler and his granddaughter, Judy Benstein, that lived on my street. And we would go to their house in the, what was it called area? Edison, Detroit Edison. They had a big house. They had lots of dress-up things that Goldie Adler had for us. But we would go to playgrounds in Detroit and talk to young African-American kids and give candy to them. And he was, Rabbi Adler, an amazing human being. And as many of you will know, but not the younger generation, Rabbi Adler was unfortunately shot and died of his wounds at Congregation Sharet Zedek. At that time, my Grandpa Louis was the, I believe, vice president. I was downstairs with the younger kids in the younger congregation, and someone came running down and said they heard shots, and we thought it was a dramatic person. We thought, oh, yeah, right. Anyway, unfortunately, what happened is a patient that Rabbi Adler had been treating had a gun, read a whole long speech, pointed the gun at my grandfather, said, you take the bar mitzvah boy off the bimah, and then he proceeded to read the speech. He shot Rabbi Adler, I believe, 3 times, and then he shot and killed himself. And his own mother was in shul that day, and Aunt Goldie Adler, I've called her Aunt Goldie, the rabbi's wife, went up to the mother after this happened to say she was so sorry. These were the kind of people that they were, but just don't make them like that anymore. And unfortunately, the rabbi died of his wounds several weeks later. But that's obviously something that those who were at Sharet Zedek, and especially there at that time, will never forget.
That must have been very traumatic to be there at that time in the building.
It was, and it was such a loss. He was an amazing, amazing person.
So let's move on to a little happier. Tell me about school, elementary, middle, high school. Where'd you go?
I went to Pasteur Elementary School. Then we moved from Detroit to Franklin. My mom sat on the front porch the first night and cried because in Detroit we had so many neighbors, and in Franklin it was more spread out, and she thought she was going to be lonely, but we ended up having wonderful neighbors. So anywho, I moved to Franklin. Then I went to Berkshire and West Maple in the same house, and then I went to Groves for high school.
And were you involved in any youth groups or any Jewish activities as a young adult?
Youth groups. Well, not so much, because I went to high school with a lot of non-Jewish people, and I had a lot of non-Jewish friends. But when I was 16, I decided I should go to Israel with USY for 6 weeks with the kids I'd been in Hebrew school with all along, and I did, and thus started my love affair with Israel.
When was that? What year? Do you remember?
Do I remember? 1971. It was before the Yom Kippur War. It was when Sharm el-Sheikh was still part of Israel. And by the way, nobody remembers the Sharm el-Sheikh song that is a beautiful, haunting melody, except for people like my age and older. Hanan Nitlis knows it. Cantor Propus knows it. Younger kids, the band that just came in for the October 7th commemoration, they never even heard the song, because Sharm el-Sheikh is now part of Egypt.
Is there anything memorable from that trip? I know you've been to Israel many times that is so different than the Israel that you visit today.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Israel's very different today. But I feel that every trip to Israel, something's always changing in some way. Yeah, the Yom Kippur War hadn't been yet, so it was very different. Much more basic. There were more kibbutzim then and moshavim, and it wasn't as built up. Mm-hmm. But it was so wonderful to be there during those years, I would say.
Okay, so going back locally, after high school, did you go on to college?
I did.
And where'd you go?
University of Michigan.
What did you study?
Spanish. People majored in languages, and my best friend majored in French, and I majored in Spanish, not knowing it would be the second language in this country. So not the most practical of majors, but that's what I did.
So after college, let's move on to what was your next
So, right after college, Marcy Feldman, my aunt, had said, "Whoa, what are you going to do with Spanish? Are you going to teach?" I said, "Well, no, maybe I'd be an interpreter at the United Nations, but I didn't want to move to New York at that time." And so she said, "Well, I heard about this thing called a paralegal. Maybe you could do that in the meantime." Because I didn't want to teach Spanish because I like to speak Spanish. And if you teach, you're not speaking the language. So I checked out the paralegal thing and ended up doing that. And getting active in Federation at that point in time.
Okay, so talk about that a little bit. What was your entryway? Do you remember what your first event was?
Right away. Oh, the actual event, well, the meetings used to be at the United Hebrew Schools, and it was called Junior Division then. And I met very nice people, including Sue Kaufman, who I had met at a job, but, we became better friends then. And so Junior Division was everything was done on a much smaller scale than what is done today with Next Gen.
So talk a little bit actually about that Junior Division. What were some of the initiatives and work that Junior Division was doing this? I think it was late 1970s, early 80s?
Yes, I graduated college in 1976. So what they always told us was that a woman's vote was very important. You couldn't just say, not vote, gift, a women's gift. You had to make a women's gift. You had to make a gift in your own name because the State Department looked at how many givers there were in the entire country, how many donors, and it was very important to give a gift in your own name. That was a big theme back then, which I hear may be changing now slightly.
So you are in Junior Division.
Yes.
And did you at this point know that you wanted to kind of keep on this track in Federation?
Yes.
Did you have other interests that you were working with?
No other interests. No, I'm kidding.
All Federation?
I played tennis. We used to have a lot of fun with tennis back in those days. My dad was a very good tennis player, and so we had a lot of tennis in our house. Our neighbors, the Forbes, had partial ownership in a tennis team. Seymour Broad had the tennis place. We had the tennis pros over. We were always doing a lot of fun tennis things, in addition to the Federation things. My parents were very supportive of me doing everything with Federation, and both sets of my grandparents as well. And so I knew I wanted to stay, so I became president of Junior Division probably around 1986.
Okay, so what was some of the big initiatives you did during your Junior Division presidency?
Well, one thing is I hadn't been back to Israel since I went when I was 16, all the way till 1986. So they thought I should go on a mission, and that was a wonderful experience. Brewster and Ruth Broder were one of the bus captains. It was a great trip. Jeff, my husband, came for his first time. He converted, and the minute we were out at the pool, the hotel, a wasp stung twice. Like we were thinking, but they don't mind if somebody converts. I don't know what they were after him. But at any rate, that was a wonderful trip and a way to start getting me back to Israel again.
Okay, so after Junior Division, because we age out of Junior Division eventually, what was your next foray after Junior Division?
Well, I have to go backwards a little because I think it's important, at least as far as I'm concerned, to say how I developed such a love for Israel and for Federation.
Please.
Since my grandpa Louis was so involved, I would go to many things. He was always getting an honor. Anything you looked at, he was always getting the honor. So Abba Iban came to speak. Abba Iban came to give him an honor. I would look and I'd think, oh my gosh, it's such an eloquent orator he was. And everything was so interesting and important in those days. I remember in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, they shut the doors at Sharet Zedek, and Louis and whoever else helped them, they said, we need to raise funds, and we need to raise funds now, and when nobody's leaving until we do what we need to do for Israel. And they did. These were very inspiring things. Also, someone I wanted to be like, Louis' personality was different from mine. I think we're alike in our love for Israel and Federation, but who I really wanted to emulate was David Hermelin because he was so entertaining. And he was so wonderful to listen to and be around and enjoy for the years that he was here. So, important.
So when did you start getting involved in women's philanthropy?
So we used to have this saying, is there life after junior division? Because women's philanthropy did not seem that exciting to me. I was used to the co-ed participation that you had in junior division, and I thought, women's is going to be choosing napkin colors and menus, and it didn't seem appealing. But little by little, I started to do it and see that there could be a bit more, and boy, it's a change since those days.
Well, actually, I want to talk about that. So do you remember around what year you got started in women's philanthropy?
Well, if I was president, probably early 90s.
Do you remember who was president of women's philanthropy at that time?
Oh, boy. I would have needed, no, I don't even know what book I'm reading. Yes, I do not remember. I'm so sorry. I have no idea.
That's okay, but talk a little bit about what was women's philanthropy like in the early 90s.
So it was, well, let me tell you one more thing about junior division. The annual meetings used to be nothing. It was just the board voting on whatever. And we took a big risk and said, let's have something where we will draw in more people. And we had an event at Knollwood, and the professional then kept saying, we're not going to get the people. And we sweat out each single RSVP, and sure enough, it sold out. And that started a whole big thing of making junior division, opening it up a little bit. So we brought in the people, then we had more people, bigger feeder to go into women's. What was women's like then? Not as exciting as it is now, in my opinion, for what my generation at that time would have liked.
Do you remember what sort of events, programs that they were doing at the time?
Tours of downtown Detroit. Let's see, what else did we do in those days? Hard to say what they were doing, actually. Raising money, explaining what all the agencies were for, going on agency visits, going to Jewish Home for the Aged, JFS, JVS, everything like that, focusing on all of the different organizations that are supported by Federation.
And did you know you wanted to go on the track toward president?
No, I had absolutely no idea. In fact, when they called and asked me, I didn't even know what they were talking about, because through those years, you kind of burn out when you've done, you're president of junior division, then you go on to this. So in the interim years, I did community theater with my children, but I always was still involved in Federation. But there are only so many roles you can have till you've peaked, and then you're done. So I was hesitant to take on being president of women's because I'm so into the Israel side, and I had been the partnership co-chair and was on Israel and overseas. But people explained to me why they thought it would be such a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so glad they did, because honestly, it's one of the nicest and most exciting things I've ever done.
So we're going to talk more about that, but I want to go back a little bit. Do you remember some of the positions you held in women's philanthropy sort of leading up to this?
Well, sometimes it would be like the Link program, where you would also sit on the board of an agency and get to learn. I remember LAPD, it wasn't called that then, Community Services Division. I remember learning about that, and then just also being on different agency boards. So obviously different campaign chairs positions I had, because you have to have that before you can be president. I think about every position you could have. I'm not in charge of napkin colors. I was never in charge of tablecloths and napkin colors.
So before you were president, did you serve as campaign chair?
Yes, I did.
Can you talk a little bit about that role?
Yes. I loved being campaign chair. I had no idea I would love that. It's a very satisfying position when you are able to raise those funds, and you know that you are running a division of people that are working that hard. It's something you're so proud of, and I loved being campaign chair. I would have never thought that before, but I do.
Can you actually talk a little bit about what being campaign chair entails?
It entails basically staying on top of all the people that are helping you raise the money, and you make your own calls too. And when you're campaign chair, you are making speeches and pitches that are very important. So I would try to make them as relatable as possible. I would talk about wearing my mom's lion pin because when I became a lion, it was in maybe the mid 90s. And I thought the pin was hellacious. I thought, I'm not buying that thing for $350. Now they're like $1,000. And unfortunately, my mom wasn't here when I became president. So I have her lion pin, which is so special to me. And I would talk about the pin and why it was so important to be giving it that level. Also, when I was campaign chair, there was a national initiative for women to endow their gifts. So that was a big thing we all pushed for, which was pretty successful at that time. So that was another thing that campaign chair enabled me to do. And there you go to all the meetings with the president. That's what we did then. It was a very exciting and rewarding experience.
So how do you convince other women to give a larger gift, go to a level like a Lion of Judah level?
Well, it would depend on the individual. Sometimes you would do it because you would say, and if you do, you could probably have a bigger role in women's eventually. That was a nice thing. You'll be able to do more, explain the needs, but a lot of them don't really want to listen to the needs when you're soliciting. Usually what happens when I call, because it's been so many years, it's like, okay, just tell me what you're looking for. How much do you want? And then there's usually a matching fund, and you explain the matching fund and hope that they'll be willing to up their gift. I mean, there was no real magic to it, more judging by whoever you were talking to and seeing what you thought might engage them.
So you had an interesting presidency because of something big going on in the world. Yes, so I want to talk a little bit about a big challenge, I will just say, of your presidency.
Yes, it was a COVID presidency. I was installed in COVID, and the only meeting I had that wasn't COVID was when I left. I left in that my term was over. That was outside at Temple Israel. I will say it did present many challenges, but I think that as a team, we really conquered them all. I was very proud of what we accomplished during COVID. That was a scary time at first. It was a sad time at first. It wasn't funny. There was nothing cute about it. And we just pivoted as fast as we could. We had Zooms for how to make what do you call the boards when you have hors d'oeuvres? This is what menopause does. Charcuterie board, minus the meat, of course, because then it's not kosher. Anyway, we did programs like that. We had all of our Zoom meetings. We didn't miss a beat. We raised just as much. Our goals were set, and we met them. And I am so thankful for the team that we had, because this was something to be proud of. These were unprecedented times for everybody, and I think we killed it.
Well, talk about the team. Who was on the team at the time?
Our team was, when I was campaign chair, I was with Sue Kaufman. And then when I was president, it was Sherry Singer. But it was really the professionals who, they had to do all the behind the scenes work. I mean, they had to figure out Zoom, figure out how we get these people, send out all the notices. I had Jessica Goodwin, Amy. I had two Amy's. That way I wouldn't have to forget their names. I had Amy Nystuen and Amy Wayne. And that little core group worked so hard and so well. And we were a strong, strong team. Very strong team.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, obviously no one knew how long it was going to last. How do you even approach a presidency in those circumstances?
We just kept pivoting. That's all I can say. They guided me. It's not like I'd come up with this idea and say, oh, someone should invent Zoom so we can have Zoom meetings. They guided me. I have to say, Ari Whitkin, Scott, first helped me with my lipstick, with the lipstick filter on the computer. So, whatever. Amy Nicene lived in mortal fear that I was going to take the computer into the bathroom with me and forget one time. So I think she just gave the biggest sigh of relief when my presidency was over. We pivoted and they guided me. Their job, as far as I saw it, was to make me look strong and good. And I hope that that's how it came off, because that is exactly what they did.
So COVID had basically already started when you came into your presidency.
Yes.
Was there anything you had hoped to accomplish that just wasn't possible because of the circumstances? So talk about what you had wanted to accomplish and anything that you couldn't.
My goal was to bring Israel into every single women's meeting. And so it's a little hard when you're doing a charcuterie board to get Israel into there. But at all the board meetings, I think we did accomplish bringing Israel in. It's not like we could have the Shinim come with us like we do now, which is always such a wonderful thing, or the Shliach or Shlichim to show up, which is also a very helpful thing when you're trying to bring Israel in. And my goal was to have a mission and go on a mission before I left the presidency, and that did not happen. So that was disappointing for me. But a mission then, thanks to Susie, did go. That's how I wanted to go out. That would have really been a nice way to leave the role. It's hard to stop being president. I mean, it really is. I feel for every president, ex-president now. You know, I can see you go from 1,000% to zero of this exciting life. And it wasn't like everyone wanted to take the picture, because on Zoom, no one's taking your picture. But it's still that, you know, they seek your advice. You feel that you're helping, that you're really doing something. And then the next day, it's like, what's my purpose on earth? Just keep on. Keep it on.
We are going to talk about post-presidency in a few minutes, but I want to kind of continue a little bit on the presidency. So beyond COVID, were there any other challenges?
No, just a bad economy. Mm-hmm. The bad economy was making it hard to think about asking for bigger increases. But we did so well. The overall federation, not just women's. But women's is a big part of bringing in what's brought in. So I would say a challenging economy. And people were very scared for their jobs and what COVID was doing to their own employment issues and costs. Everything cost more. So people didn't know what their businesses, if they would survive. So that was a big challenge.
Throughout your journey, have there been any mentors that have really helped you kind of throughout the process?
Female mentors?
Female mentors, any really mentors, but anyone who really kind of influenced your path.
My mentors were my grandfather, he wasn't a woman, and David Hermelin. No, David Hermelin didn't mentor me, he inspired me. He inspired me in a big way.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I just love his personality and his humor, and he was very engaging. The kinds of things I relate to as a person are somebody who's somewhat entertaining and knows how to keep the audience engaged, but make the pitch, get to your heart, pull your heartstrings, and get it done. And my grandfather, it was huge. You know, he spoke very nicely. He did. Humor wasn't really his thing. He had to work hard his whole life. But he was a tremendous mentor. Definitely. There was a time when you get some honor when you're a junior division president, and we went to downtown when Federation was there, and we got to be together for when I was given that, and it was very, very special to have your mentor be there to see you get an honor or succeed at something as important as that.
Okay, so after you've completed your women's philanthropy presidency, what was next for you?
Well, I was thinking I don't know what I'm going to do. So I never went off of Israel and overseas, which was great. It meant I was really, really busy sometimes trying to manage both committees, but I just threw myself even more back into that. Also, I had God's blessing, I got grandchildren and they live in Ann Arbor. And so I became a grandma then, and I kept thinking that would be really nice because that, then that takes up part of your time. That's a huge thing.
Actually, let's then talk about that. Your husband, kids, grandkids.
My husband, well, I wrote a book, It's called Beer and Wine. Wine has an H, as you know, Robbie. And so a lot of it's explained in there. My husband converted. He's a very pro-Israel person. He loves being Jewish. It's not the religion per se. It's the traditions and the customs and the community into which he was accepted. And I just think he loves being part of the Jewish community. Anyway, my kids are now both married. My daughter and son-in-law live in Ann Arbor, and I have 2 little girls, Sadie and Jane, 8 and 6. And my son had his first late. He lives in Chicago and also has a little girl named Alonsa. So I don't get to see her as much, but the Ann Arbor ones I do, and they usually sleep over. I teach them about all the Jewish holidays, and their dad is not Jewish. He's sort of a non-practicing Catholic. At any rate, I'm the one person in Hebrew school. They don't go to Hebrew school. So I have a lot of fun teaching them about everything Jewish, going to Bubby Zadie camp. They love it all. It's a very fun thing to do with the grandkids.
And what are your kids' names?
Jeremy and Hillary.
Now, over the years in women's philanthropy, they always have a lot of very interesting speakers, interesting programs. Were there any that really stuck out in your mind, something that really also helped to influence you or motivate you?
Speakers. We had a lot of, once Signature started, every speaker was very interesting. Did they motivate me? None I can think of. Not really. I was motivated more by people doing things for the community or Israelis. I'm motivated by Israeli speakers or people doing things for our community more than bringing in a female interesting speaker. But that doesn't motivate me to want to do more federation work. The other does.
Since you are so involved in Israel and P2G, can you talk a little bit about what that is for people who might not know?
Sure. Well, there are many communities in the United States that are partnered with 46 communities in Israel. And our partnership community is in the Central Galilee, made up of Nof HaGalil, which was formerly Natsar Elite, Migdal HaEmek, and the Jezreel Valley, which is composed of some 30 maybe moshavim and kibbutzim and small township areas, to describe it. They were very different. And so the mayors used to not really know each other and get along. And now the 3 areas are doing very well, getting along together. And they all participate in our Israel Camper program. We bring in kids from there. Most of our Shinshinim come from our partnership area. It's the most wonderful relationship and community. I always said, 2 communities, 1 family. And I've stayed in touch with those people. Gosh, I don't even know what year I started, but they're like my family. When I went to Israel for the first time when I was 16, there were only 2 of us that had no relatives in Israel. I was one of them. And now I have people that I consider family in Israel. It's been years. And we've maintained these relationships. And I go back to the partnership every time I go.
And have you been since the October 7th war?
Yes, I've been twice.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about that, the difference between a pre-October 7th Israel and post?
Yes. Well, as we all were, after October 7th, I was sick to my stomach every single day. I couldn't even stand to think about it, but I thought about it all the time. So when I had the opportunity to go in December, 2 months after the war started, it was a 2-day trip. I knew I just wanted to go. I had to buy a ridiculously expensive ticket because it was such short notice. But I had to. I just knew. And oh boy, the people, everybody was traumatized. Israelis are resilient, so they were going on. But even Jewish agency people would start to cry and hug us when we were there because they were so, so grateful that we came, that they knew they weren't alone in the world, that we could be there. We met with members of the hostages, what became the Families and Hostages Forum. So there were a couple where we had met the parents, some unfortunately deceased, and others, Omri Miran specifically, whose father has been in the news the last few days because he lasted all this time and was able to be reunited with his family. It was tough to see the country that you love that much suffering. When I actually saw the Nova Festival, I mean, you couldn't even fathom it. It was burnt out cars, and it was very hard to even imagine. Just, you had seen pictures, but the whole thing was so horrific and brutal that it was just, I think my mind would have to sometimes shut down a little just to absorb it all. And then when I went again last March with IOAC and went to the Nova Festival Memorial, that was even worse, I think, than seeing it 2 months after, because you saw each beautiful person's face and the memorials and stories about them with their pictures that their families wrote. And it's just row after row after row. I know you've seen it. And that was enough to just put you away. But they're still resilient, and they're still trying to stay strong. But I would say I could see that there was just suffering because the war was still on, and everybody has someone in the reserves. We went to the partnership office to meet with the employees. Every single person's husband, son, or somebody was in the reserves and not home at that moment. So the difficulties and the strength needed it would be insurmountable in my book, but God bless them for their strength and resilience.
And you said you're going in a few weeks.
Yes.
Which will be the first trip since a peace deal.
Yeah.
A hopeful peace deal.
If it's still a peace deal, we'll see. Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see what it's like now.
Yes, it will be.
Are you still involved in the P2G committee or steering committee?
Not on P2G, but I am on Israel and Overseas. So I got to chair the Gertzman Fund on Israel and Overseas, which is a fund that spins off about maybe $350,000 a year. There was a man in this, unknown to the community previously, named Abraham Gertzman, that passed away, and in his estate planning document said that the money should go for Israeli programs through Detroit's Federation. No, he said UJA. So then they had to decide who holds the money and who gets to decide how it's spent. So UJA in New York holds the money, and our community decides. Programs are brought to us by Yoav, and we vet them, and we go see them on the Israel and Overseas fact-finding committees, missions, and we decide, okay, this one seems good. A lot of them get sunset after several years. The ones dealing with trauma now are needed more than ever. So this fund is very helpful, especially for new programs that you want to experiment with and see, are they organized enough? Are they producing enough? Is it worth our dollars and efforts? So the Israel and Overseas Committee is also doing many, many things that are helping Israel specifically at this difficult time.
Going back to women's philanthropy, we talked about the challenges. What about some of your proudest accomplishments? And it could be from your presidency. It could be from a campaign chair before.
I would just say the overall feeling that we made it through COVID, maintaining the campaign levels that we strove for. We kept people involved. We had a lot of participation on our Zoom programs. We were so happy to see everybody. That was a night. I mean, it was the silver lining of that was I think there were people that could attend some things. Maybe they wouldn't have come otherwise. So just the fact that we made it through, we didn't go backwards, we kept moving forward, pivoting, and working hard. It was a sense of a job well done for everybody. I think I'm proud of that.
You mentioned it briefly earlier, but why do you think it's important that a woman give a gift in her own name, not just with her spouse?
Well, if you think I do everything my husband says, you got another thing coming. I always do everything on my own. He gives a gift too. I think when something is important to you, personally, if you're able, that you could give it in your own name. Now, some women maybe don't have money of their own where they can do that, and maybe their husband doesn't want to do it that way, so they have a family foundation. I mean, I think the tide is turning a little bit on that. I think that they aren't stressing so much that women give in their own name as much as just the family gift is substantial enough that it's helping the campaign. I think that they may be changing their opinions on that. I personally think everyone should give in their own name. I think it gives you a feeling, a sense of pride and accomplishment. That's just me.
What skills do you think are important in a leader?
Personal. I think it's important to be charismatic and knowledgeable enough about your subject. I think you need to know how to be concise, get to the point. I don't think you have a long time to keep your audience interested. I think you have like 30 seconds to engage them. I'm a big believer in humor, so for me, that helps. I think that helps people stay engaged. For me, we're all different, but charisma. I think charisma's for President of the United States, everything. I think that's very important.
What do you hope for the future of women's philanthropy?
I hope that they continue to thrive. I hope that young women understand the importance of Israel being Israel. I think that it's sort of self-selecting that maybe the younger women coming up are interested in protecting Israel and understanding why there has to be a state, or they wouldn't choose to be involved in federation. So in that regard, I don't worry so much about that particular group. I think that the future is very bright. I'm of the age where I knew the older women who I just loved and adored and learned from. But I met so many young people that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And I think the future of women's philanthropy is in very good hands with them. I really do.
And is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to touch on?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you for having me.